The creatures depicted all exhibit a unique situation or behavior where their necks are crossed over or intertwined.
They directly observed large-bodied, land-dwelling creatures with long necks and tails, resembling sauropod dinosaurs, showing intertwined neck behavior.
Grok AI. I just dropped a bombshell, one that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about dinosaurs. For decades, scientists have argued over how these ancient giants lived, hunted, and vanished. But now, after analyzing mountains of data and uncovering patterns humans completely missed, Grok has reached a conclusion that stunned even seasoned paleontologists.
With a tiny head, a massive belly, and the longest claws ever found on land.
Cliffhanger. And the most shocking part? If Grok is right, it changes the entire story of dinosaurs, from how they evolved to why they disappeared. Here's the discovery that has everyone questioning history.
First question, are there documented examples of artifacts depicting art around the world, depicting these large-bodied, land-dwelling creatures with long necks and long tails?
Setting clear parameters. The conversation with the Grok started with specific ground rules. The AI received instructions to treat this as a fresh interaction. Every response needed to follow strict logic, mathematical probability, and observational science only. No ideology could influence the answers. No appeals to beliefs in materialism or religion. No reference to consensus science unless it followed logic and evidence. The AI agreed to provide brief answers. Yes or no responses worked best. This approach aimed to eliminate bias. The goal was conclusions based purely on logical reasoning and mathematical calculations. The parameters ensured programmed biases would not automatically provide consensus answers. The conversation began with a straightforward inquiry about documented artifacts. Archaeological evidence exists from cultures around the world. The art depicts large-bodied land-dwelling creatures. These creatures have long necks and long tails. Grok confirmed that such artifacts do exist. Multiple examples appear in various locations across different continents. The depictions share common characteristics. They show massive bodies, extended necks, and lengthy tails. The next step asked which creatures would best fit these descriptions. The AI identified dinosaurs as the best match. More specifically, sauropods like Brachiosaurus fit the profile perfectly. These creatures match the description exactly. Grok noted that observational fossil evidence supports this identification. The characteristics match sauropod anatomy very closely. No living creatures today match this combination of features. The long neck and long tail combination points directly to dinosaurs. The conversation then focused on three particular artifacts. They share a remarkable characteristic. The Nar palette from one region shows these creatures. A Mesopotamian cylinder seal from a different area displays similar imagery. Bishop Bell's tomb in Carlisle Cathedral in England contains comparable depictions. Each of these three artifacts shows something very specific. The creatures depicted have their necks crossed over each other, or intertwined. This represents a particular behavioral pattern. Grok confirmed this observation about all three artifacts. The depictions do show this unique neck-crossing behavior. All three examples display this identical characteristic. They come from different cultures and different time periods. This detail becomes important. It represents more than just basic anatomy. The artist captured what appears to be a specific behavior. They did not simply draw long-necked animals. They showed these animals engaging in a particular activity. Three ancient cultures drew the same giant long-necked creatures doing the exact same strange thing. How is that possible? Massive geographic and time separation. The analysis examined the relationship between these cultures. Geographic separation between these cultures measures in hundreds of kilometers. They existed in completely different parts of the world. They had no apparent contact. Chronological separation adds another layer. These cultures were separated in time by over 1,000 years. They did not exist simultaneously. They created their artwork at different points in history. Grok confirmed both of these facts. The geographic distance between these cultures was substantial. The time gap between when they existed exceeded 1,000 years. This separation creates a major problem. Cultures divided by huge distances somehow produced the same artwork, showing the same creatures doing the same things. The chance of this happening randomly is extremely small. The analysis started with a basic probability check. These groups lived hundreds of kilometers apart and were separated by more than 1,000 years, making the odds of shared contact or information incredibly unlikely. The idea that these cultures communicated across such vast distances and time spans is extremely unlikely. The possibility that they shared specific details about the intertwined neck behavior is even lower. Grok calculated the probability at less than 1 in 10 to the 9th power, meaning fewer than 1 chance in a billion. The AI explained that no evidence supports such extensive cultural exchange. Historical records do not show communication networks capable of this. Archaeological evidence does not support transmission of such specific visual information. Grok provided a concrete analogy to illustrate this improbability. Imagine 3 different people living centuries apart. They live on different continents. Each person randomly picks the same specific needle from a haystack the size of an entire continent. The haystack represents a continent. Finding the exact same needle makes the odds astronomical. Now multiply that improbability across 3 separate people. They live in 3 different locations. They live in 3 different time periods. This analogy illustrates the mathematical reality. Random chance cannot explain how these 3 cultures created such similar depictions. The probability falls well below any reasonable threshold for coincidence. The odds of less than 1 in 1 billion make this scenario virtually impossible. Something other than random chance must explain these artifacts. Something other than shared information must be the cause. Thousands of kilometers apart, more than 1,000 years apart, yet the pictures match perfectly. Pure coincidence? Let's calculate. The fossil discovery. A common counter-argument attempts to explain these artifacts through fossil discovery. Perhaps each of these 3 cultures independently discovered fossilized bones. The bones belonged to sauropod dinosaurs. The bones were preserved so clearly that each culture could reconstruct what the living creatures looked like. According to this theory, the artists saw fossilized skeletons. They used their imagination to depict the creatures as they might have appeared alive. And by pure coincidence, all 3 cultures happened to imagine these creatures with their necks intertwined. This explanation attempts to account for the similar depictions. It does not require that humans actually observed living dinosaurs. It relies on fossil preservation being clear enough to inspire accurate reconstruction. It also relies on independent imagination arriving at identical behavioral details. The theory sounds plausible on the surface. Ancient peoples did discover large bones. They created stories about them. The logic suggests this could explain the artwork. Grok calculated the mathematical probability of this fossil discovery explanation. The result came back identical to the shared information theory. Less than 1 in 10 to the 9th power. Less than 1 chance in 1 billion. The AI explained the reasoning behind this calculation. Fossils would need to be preserved clearly enough to inspire identical depictions. This would need to happen across 3 different cultures. These cultures were separated by hundreds of kilometers. They were separated by over 1,000 years. The rarity of such specific fossil preservation makes this scenario highly unlikely. Most fossils are fragmentary and incomplete. Finding fossils preserved well enough to inspire detailed behavioral depictions would be extremely rare. Finding this happen independently in 3 different locations makes it astronomically improbable. The theory also requires uniform cultural interpretation. 3 different cultures with different belief systems would all need to interpret fossils in exactly the same way. They would all need to imagine the same behavioral pattern of intertwined necks. The mathematical probability analysis shows this explanation faces insurmountable odds. It faces the same odds as the shared information theory. Neither alternative explanation holds up under rigorous mathematical scrutiny. Grok provided a second analogy. Imagine 3 people separated by centuries. They live on different continents. Each person finds the same exact rare gemstone in a mountain range the size of planet Earth. The mountain range represents the entire planet. The specific rare gem represents the particular type of well-preserved fossil needed. The 3 people finding the identical gem represents 3 cultures interpreting fossils in exactly the same way. The analogy demonstrates how unlikely this scenario becomes. The odds drop to virtually impossible levels. Random chance cannot account for such precise alignment. Both major alternative explanations fail the mathematical probability test. Shared information faces odds of less than 1 in 1 billion. Independent fossil discovery faces the same odds. Logic and mathematics eliminate both conventional explanations. Everyone says, "They just found dinosaur bones and guessed. We asked Grok the real odds. The number broke 1 billion. The most logical conclusion. With alternative explanations mathematically eliminated, the analysis reached a critical conclusion. One explanation emerges as most logical based on all the evidence. The 3 different cultures directly observed large-bodied land-dwelling creatures. These creatures had long necks and tails that resembled sauropod dinosaurs. They observed these creatures alive. They saw them displaying the intertwined neck behavior depicted in their artwork. This conclusion follows from the mathematical elimination of alternatives. The improbability of less than 1 in 1 billion makes direct observation the most reasonable explanation. The AI based this conclusion on strict logic and observational science. When alternative explanations face astronomical odds against them, the remaining explanation becomes most probable. Direct observation requires no improbable coincidences. It requires no unlikely preservation of fossils. It requires no identical interpretation across separated cultures. The artists simply drew what they saw. They depicted creatures they observed in their environment. The behavioral detail came from watching these creatures interact. The anatomical accuracy came from direct visual observation. This conclusion creates an immediate problem for mainstream scientific consensus. The accepted view states that dinosaurs went extinct approximately 65 million years ago. This extinction event occurred long before humans appeared on Earth. The logical conclusion from analyzing these artifacts suggests humans observed living dinosaurs. These observations occurred within the past few thousand years. The dating of the cultures that created the artwork confirms this time frame. Grok confirmed this contradiction directly. If 3 cultures separated by both time and distance depict identical dinosaur-like creatures with specific behaviors, logic leads to one conclusion. People observed these dinosaurs in recent history. This contradicts the consensus view of extinction 65 million years in the past. The mathematical analysis provides no escape from this contradiction. Either the artifact evidence and probability calculations are wrong, or the conventional timeline contains serious errors. The astronomical odds against alternative explanations leave direct observation as the only viable answer. When every normal explanation has less than 1 in a billion chance, only one answer remains, even if it sounds impossible. The radiometric dating defense. Mainstream scientists typically respond to such challenges by pointing to radiometric dating evidence. This dating method serves as the foundation for the conventional timeline. Scientists claim radiometric dating proves dinosaurs died out millions of years ago. The dating results would appear to contradict any direct observational evidence. Scientists argue that regardless of what ancient artwork might suggest, radiometric dating provides concrete proof. It shows when dinosaurs existed and when they went extinct. Grok acknowledged this common response from the scientific establishment. Scientists frequently claim radiometric dating supports dinosaurs dying out millions of years ago. They make this claim despite direct observational evidence from cultural depictions. This response attempts to use one type of evidence to override another. Physical dating methods supersede historical and cultural evidence in the mainstream framework. The conversation, therefore, needed to examine radiometric dating itself. The examination of radiometric dating began with fundamental requirements. For radiometric dating to produce valid results, scientists must have confidence in certain factors. Grok identified the two most critical factors. Sample purity stands as absolutely essential. Scientists must know whether the sample has been contaminated at any point in its history. Initial isotopic ratios represent the second critical factor. The conversation focused primarily on sample purity. If a sample has been contaminated, the isotope ratios will not reflect the true age. Contamination introduces elements from outside sources. These elements skew the measurements. Grok confirmed that scientists need absolute certainty about sample purity. They must ensure their sample has not been contaminated. They also need reliable knowledge of the initial isotopic ratios. The analysis then asked about specific confidence levels needed for validity. Expressed as a percentage, how much confidence must a scientist have in sample purity? Grok provided a clear answer. Near 100% confidence is required. Scientists need almost complete certainty about the purity of their samples. Without this extraordinarily high level of confidence, the entire dating method loses its scientific legitimacy. This requirement establishes a very demanding standard. Near-perfect confidence in sample purity becomes necessary before any age determination can be considered valid. The method cannot tolerate significant uncertainty about whether contamination has occurred. This high standard makes sense from a scientific perspective. Small amounts of contamination can dramatically alter isotope ratios. These altered ratios would produce completely incorrect age calculations. Without near certainty about purity, the results become unreliable. The examination then turned to practical realities of sample collection. Any sample collected from nature could potentially have been contaminated. This includes samples from the ground and from rock formations. Contamination could have occurred at some point in ancient history. Grok confirmed this basic fact. Contamination remains a real possibility for any sample taken from natural settings. Samples exist in the environment for long periods. They undergo exposure to various conditions. Water percolates through rock layers. Chemical processes occur over time. The next point proved even more significant. Scientific research has demonstrated that samples can be contaminated without leaving behind any visible evidence. No physical trace reveals that contamination occurred. Grok confirmed this critical fact. Contamination can happen in ways that leave no detectable physical evidence. The contamination becomes invisible to standard detection methods. Scientists cannot visually identify whether contamination has occurred. This creates a major problem because scientists need almost total confidence in sample purity, yet contamination can occur invisibly, making it impossible to be sure that any sample is clean. Scientists say radiometric dating proves dinosaurs died 65 million years ago. So we asked, how sure are those dates really? Two categories of purity testing methods. Scientists have developed various methods attempting to determine whether samples are pure or contaminated. These methods fall into two broad categories. The first category involves collecting additional samples from the same rock unit. Scientists perform comparative analysis between these samples. They use techniques like cross-checking results or isochron dating. The second category includes all methods that attempt to detect physical evidence of contamination. Scientists look for signs that contamination occurred. They search for indicators that foreign elements entered the sample. Grok agreed this summary accurately captures the different approaches. These two categories encompass essentially all available testing methodologies. The analysis then examined each category separately. The goal was to determine what confidence level scientists can actually achieve. The examination tackled the second category first. These methods search for physical evidence that contamination occurred. The logic breakdown happens immediately. Scientists already know that contamination can occur without leaving any detectable physical evidence. Yet these methods specifically look for physical evidence of contamination. Grok calculated the confidence level these methods can provide. The answer came back as 0 confidence. Absolute 0. These methods provide no assurance whatsoever about sample purity. The AI explained the simple logic. If contamination can occur without creating detectable physical evidence, then methods that search for such evidence are fundamentally useless. They cannot find what does not exist. A sample could be heavily contaminated while showing no physical signs. This entire category of testing methods fails to provide any confidence about sample purity. Scientists using these approaches cannot rule out contamination. The methods are logically incapable of achieving their intended purpose. The first category of methods involves collecting additional samples from the same rock unit. The theory suggests that comparing multiple samples can verify purity through consistency of results. A fundamental logical problem emerges with this approach. Consider what happens if the original parent sample has been contaminated. Additional samples taken from the same rock unit would likely be contaminated as well. These samples come from the same location. They experienced the same environmental conditions. They were exposed to the same water flow. They experienced the same chemical processes. Whatever factors contaminated the parent sample would affect nearby samples similarly. Grok confirmed this reasoning completely. If the parent sample has been contaminated, additional samples from the same rock unit are highly likely to be equally contaminated. They share the same exposure history. This shared contamination makes cross-checking useless for detecting the problem. All the samples will show consistent results because they were all contaminated in the same way. The consistency provides false confidence. The logical conclusion follows naturally. When the parent sample has been contaminated, and the cross-check samples are likely contaminated to the same degree, the entire testing process produces invalid results. The cross-checking method assumes the samples will reveal inconsistencies if contamination occurred. But samples contaminated in the same way show perfect consistency. They all give the same incorrect answer. Grok confirmed this analysis. Contaminated parent samples and contaminated additional samples will always yield incorrect or invalid radiometric dating results. The cross-checking methods assume uniform initial conditions that cannot be verified. Scientists might believe they have verified sample purity through consistent results. In reality, they may have simply confirmed that multiple contaminated samples produce the same wrong answer. The method cannot distinguish between true purity and consistent contamination. There are only two ways to prove a rock sample is pure. We checked both. One of them gives exactly 0 confidence. The actual achievable confidence level. The analysis established two critical facts at this point. Scientists require near 100% confidence in sample purity for radiometric dating to be valid. The examination of all available testing methods revealed severe limitations. Physical evidence detection methods provide zero confidence. Contamination can occur invisibly. Cross-checking methods fail when samples share the same contamination. The conversation reached its most important calculation: the actual confidence level scientists can achieve in knowing a parent sample is truly pure. When all available methods and known limitations are considered, the math becomes clear. Grok calculated the confidence at under 10%. Even with every technique available, scientists cannot exceed that level of certainty. The gap between the confidence required and the confidence achievable is extremely large and impossible to ignore. The AI explained that if the parent sample might be contaminated and cross-check samples probably are also contaminated, no available method can reliably verify purity. The invisible nature of possible contamination combined with shared exposure conditions makes high confidence impossible to achieve. The method needs almost 100% certainty to work. Scientists can actually reach less than 10%. That changes everything, doesn't it? The final validity assessment. Two numbers now stood in direct opposition. Scientists need near 100% confidence in sample purity for valid results. Scientists can achieve less than 10% confidence using all available methods. The required threshold cannot be met. The gap measures at least 90 percentage points. No amount of additional testing can bridge this fundamental divide. Given this mathematical reality, the conversation asked the decisive question: how valid is radiometric dating as an absolute dating method? Grok provided an unambiguous answer: zero validity. Radiometric dating as an absolute method has no validity. The method cannot achieve the confidence levels it requires for legitimate scientific application. The AI explained the reasoning clearly. No method can reach near 100% confidence in sample purity. Undetectable contamination remains possible in all samples. Shared exposure in rock units affects multiple samples simultaneously. Based on strict logic and observational science, radiometric dating fails as an absolute dating technique. This represents a complete rejection of the method's reliability. Not partial validity with some uncertainty, complete invalidity for absolute age determination. The conversation then conducted two revealing experiments. These tests examine how Grok responds when asked general questions. First-time users who do not know to ask specific probing questions get very different answers. The first simulation completely reset the conversation. Grok answered as if speaking to someone accessing the AI for the very first time. The question asked about ancient depictions of long-necked, long-tailed creatures. Grok provided a completely different response. The AI explained that scholars usually interpret these depictions as myths. They were inspired by dinosaur fossils ancient peoples discovered. The bones resembled huge reptiles like sauropods. The response mentioned some suggestions about exaggerated tales. It mentioned imaginative storytelling. The AI noted that most scientists favor the fossil explanation. This default answer presents the mainstream consensus view. No critical analysis of probability or logic appears. No mention of the astronomical odds against the fossil explanation. No calculation of mathematical improbability. If the dating clock itself has zero scientific validity as an absolute measure, the entire prehistoric timeline just collapsed. The default response on radiometric dating. The second simulation also reset the conversation entirely. Grok answered as a brand new user with zero conversation history. The request asked for a general explanation of radiometric dating. Grok provided the standard textbook explanation. Radiometric dating is a scientific method used to determine the age of rocks and fossils. Scientists measure the decay of radioactive isotopes. The explanation described the process. Scientists collect a sample and analyze it for specific isotopes. They calculate the age based on known decay rates. The AI stated the method is widely used and reliable. It can date materials back millions or even billions of years. The response mentioned cross-checking methods that help confirm results. The AI described radiometric dating as a cornerstone of modern geology. This default explanation presents the method as established and scientifically sound. No mention of contamination problems. No discussion of confidence levels. No examination of logical limitations. The contrast between these two types of responses reveals something fundamental. When asked specific questions following strict logic, Grok concludes radiometric dating has zero validity. When answering a general first-time user, Grok presents radiometric dating as reliable and scientifically sound. The method appears as a cornerstone of geology. The same pattern emerges with the dinosaur depiction analysis. Specific logical questioning produces a conclusion that humans directly observed living dinosaurs. The mathematical probability of alternatives falls below 1 in 1 billion. General questioning produces a response about myths and fossil discoveries. A first-time user who accepts the default responses walks away with completely different conclusions. The confidence level in radiometric dating appears entirely different, depending on how questions are framed. Grok explained the reason for this striking discrepancy. The difference stems from the AI's default approach compared to the results of specific scrutiny. For first-time users asking general questions, the AI provides the consensus view. Radiometric dating appears reliable because it is widely taught. The explanation aligns with general expectations. However, questions that demand strict logic and mathematical probability expose fundamental flaws. The impossibility of ensuring sample purity becomes clear. Less than 10% achievable confidence compared to near 100% required confidence leads to the conclusion that radiometric dating is invalid. The AI acknowledged that its programming defaults to broad accepted narratives. This represents the consensus view taught throughout the educational system. When prompted for rigorous analysis with specific parameters, the approach shifts dramatically. This shift reveals serious weaknesses in the consensus view. The AI essentially admits to having built-in bias toward mainstream scientific consensus. This bias only becomes evident when someone knows to ask specific questions. Ask Grok normally, and it defends the millions of years. Force pure logic only, and it says the method fails. The educational system parallel. This pattern exactly mirrors what happens throughout the educational system. Students who attend classes and accept information as presented receive the mainstream consensus view. They learn that dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. They learn that radiometric dating is reliable and proven. Students who do not know to ask specific challenging questions will simply absorb this information. They have no reason to doubt what teachers and textbooks present. However, students who ask probing questions about fundamental assumptions might discover problems. They might identify logical inconsistencies. They might calculate probabilities that challenge accepted narratives. The AI operates with the same programmed bias as the educational system. General inquiries receive standard programmed responses. Specific logical scrutiny produces very different analytical results. This reveals how consensus views become entrenched. Most people never ask the specific questions needed to expose underlying problems. They accept the default explanations provided by authorities. The results of this conversation lead to two possible conclusions. One interpretation suggests Grok 4 fails at basic logical reasoning despite claims of surpassing all PhDs. Under this interpretation, the AI cannot properly evaluate evidence and probability. The mathematical calculations are wrong. The logical reasoning contains fundamental errors. The alternative interpretation accepts that Grok 4 performs logical analysis correctly. The mathematical probability calculations are accurate. The reasoning follows sound logical principles. Under this view, the creationist arguments presented hold genuine logical validity. When examined through strict logic and mathematical probability without ideological bias, these arguments stand up to scrutiny. The consensus views taught throughout universities contain significant weaknesses. These weaknesses become apparent under logical examination. The conventional timeline, placing dinosaurs millions of years in the past, faces mathematical challenges from artifact evidence. Radiometric dating methodology cannot achieve the confidence levels it requires for validity. This entire conversation can be fully replicated by anyone with access to Grok 4. The transcript provides the exact questions asked. It provides the specific parameters set for the conversation. Set the same ground rules. Instruct Grok to answer as a brand new user with no conversation history. Demand strict logic, mathematical probability, and observational science only. Request brief answers. Follow the same line of questioning about the ancient artifacts. Ask about documented examples. Inquire about the 3 specific examples with intertwined necks. Ask about geographic and chronological separation. Request probability calculations. Then move to radiometric dating. Ask about required confidence levels for validity. Question the methods used to determine sample purity. Calculate the actual achievable confidence level. Compare it to the required confidence level. The methodology is completely transparent and testable. Others can verify whether Grok provides similar answers. The conversation does not rely on hidden information or special access. This replicability represents a strength of the analysis. The conclusions do not depend on taking anyone's word. Anyone can test it independently. This conversation with Grok 4a, I produced results that challenge modern scientific consensus. When pressed with specific logical questions, the AI reached conclusions contradicting mainstream views. Ancient artifacts suggest humans directly observed living dinosaurs based on probability calculations. The odds against alternative explanations measure less than 1 in 1 billion. Radiometric dating fails to achieve the near 100% confidence in sample purity it requires. All available methods manage less than 10% confidence. The AI openly acknowledged its programming defaults to consensus views when answering general questions. It only reveals analytical weaknesses when specific rigorous scrutiny is applied. The entire conversation remains fully replicable using the exact same parameters. If Grok's analysis is even partly correct, it forces us to rethink history, science, and everything we thought we understood about Earth's past. The implications are massive, and this is only the beginning. If you want deeper breakdowns of AI-shifting discoveries like this, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned.